Every time we kind of open our mouths to tell us stories about who we think we are, it's a little bit of a work of fiction.
So Oprah, where you at, girl? Where are you? Me doing me, right?
Kind of sharp. That's insane. Jellyfish. What a pleasure.
Another compliment. There she is. And welcome to Hot Mics. Thanks for joining us on TuneIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Please hit like, subscribe, the notification bell. Hi, here we go. Here is the tell. Amy Griffin has a mounting problem with the dueling lawsuits that have resulted from her central claims in her 2025 New York Times best-selling memoir, The Tell. She's been sued by a former middle school classmate, Joleene Altum, for invasion of privacy, for the intentional infliction of emotional distress, the negligent infliction of emotional distress. She claims that Amy appropriated her traumatic childhood assault and grape, we will say, by a teacher. She says unequivocally the character Claudia in Amy's book is her. Others providing declarations on Jolene's behalf in the lawsuit say, out of the 9 characteristics, descriptions of this Claudia in Amy's book, Joleene fits every one of them. Amy says Claudia in her book is not Joleene, and that these experiences are her own memories recovered during psychedelic-assisted therapy, MDMA, in 2020. Amy has countersued for defamation. Limited discovery has taken place, and now there's a freeze essentially on all legal activity until the judge holds a hearing on the merits of Jolene's case July 23rd, 3 days from now. Since our last episode, I've spoken to a good friend now, a journalist who is writing a 5-part series for a major magazine on this, a friend of mine who I've come to love, who has worked with a close loved one of mine in psychedelic-assisted therapy. We talk about what MDMA is capable of, what it's not. Many acquaintances of Amy's, people I know that she knows, and she knows the people we know together. And I've reached out to a lot of people directly involved in these lawsuits. But most importantly, I listened to The Tell over the weekend, narrated by Amy Griffin herself. How Oprah and the connected cabal of A-list celebrities rallied around Amy, almost instinctively eschewing the immediate alarms and reservations of every reader I've spoken to is interesting.
Amy Griffin! Good to see you, Chicagoans. So good. Hello to Amy. Say hello to Amy. Say hello to Amy. Amy, this is Oprah calling you about The Tell.
On Oprah, she talks about carrying around a secret. Oprah says, you're only as sick as your secrets. And they agree. And then Oprah says, well, Amy, tell everyone yours. And here's what Amy says.
Well, the secret that I discovered was the idea that I had been, for many years, abused in a school bathroom by a teacher.
You uncovered the idea? Okay. All throughout Amy's book, she astoundingly provides several off-ramps, right? Little caveats, moments of incredulity like this, this couldn't have happened to me. So much second guessing. For Oprah, who was fried, pun intended, by the author of A Million Little Pieces, James Fry, you'd think her antenna would be up. She was all in on Amy Griffin, whom she introduced on her podcast in a most laudatory fashion.
Amy Griffin is the founder of the investment firm G9 Ventures. She's a financial visionary supporting female founders of iconic brands like Goop, Bumble, Spanx, and Hello Sunshine.
So Oprah, where you at, girl? Where are you? And it's not just Oprah. In the buildup to the release, and in the weeks and months after the release of the book, and the fanfare and the adulation for Amy was without scrutiny. They were all in, especially those female founders who took millions of investment dollars. Now, the book that I read or listened to is not particularly well written. It's sort of basic in my view. She used a ghostwriter for it named Sam Lansky, the same guy who was the ghostwriter for Britney Spears. Sam, by the way, wrote his own book about recovering traumatic childhood memories through ayahuasca. So what a find, right? A match made in heaven here. Originally, Sam's was a memoir. He changed his to fiction, I assume, to take more liberties. Here's Sam talking about his book, and the words he chooses are interesting.
The more I wrote this story, which is really a story about, the ways in which we tell ourselves stories as people as we move through the world, the more I realized that every time we kind of open our mouths to tell us stories about who we think we are, it's a little bit of a work of fiction, I think. And I really wanted to dig into and explore that idea of how just by virtue of telling a story about something, we kind of end up making things up about ourselves.
As you listen to Amy narrate her book, her affect is noticeable, right? She claims her 11-year-old confronted her with this. Do you know how hard it is to have you as a mother? You do everything so perfectly, Mom. You make everything look so easy. How are we to relate to you? You're here, but you're not here, says Gigi, her 11-year-old. Where are you, Mom? This moment, Amy says, is the final straw that made her dig into her past. Now, note here, not one person who has reached out to me because of this coverage or with whom I've spoken about it is pro Amy in a, hashtag believe her type of way. They all confess to a doubt when they were reading the book and consuming the promotional tour. So why did Oprah and others in the glitterati, give her carte blanche and just platform Amy without question? And on that note, Oprah makes a broad claim about the very wealthy people in the world, with which I kind of disagree.
People think when you have money that you can't have sadness or trauma or difficulties or challenges.
Maybe so, but a regular woman making $70,000 a year is not getting this kind of access or attention or platform. Also in the tell, Amy often writes in a disbelievingly relatable way. Example, I wondered so often how I ended up in so many of the spaces where the abuse happened without anybody noticing. Where were the adults who were supposed to be protecting me? Why were they so distracted? Which, comes off as both preemptive and inoculating. She says what we're thinking, which dulls the impact, right? And I can't believe it of it all. She answers our questions by asking them first. This book of Amy's stretches the boundaries of, the believe her movement. It carries the power to kill it. And worse, it proposes the idea of toxic femininity. And by the way, all propelled by women. I've read the book. I've also read the proposal to the book, which was circulated to publishing companies. Originally, the tell was called Believe Me. The book and the proposal are not one and the same. The book includes two people who raped her. The middle school teacher between the ages of 12 and 16, multiple accounts there, violent, graphically depicted, and a guy named James, the son of her father's hunting buddy, whom her dad connected her with in London when she was studying there. More on him later. But since our last episode, an article appeared, I think on Friday, in the New York Post. Team Amy was behind it, and they point the spotlight at a now familiar villain, not Joleene, but the New York Times, claiming that the Times has a women problem. They cite the mistreatment of women who came forward against the, U.S. Senate Democrat candidate from Maine, Graham Plattner. And in Amy's case, they have a major issue with the New York Times reporter, Katie Rossman. They say that Katie is jealous of Amy's book, outperforming her own memoir, which came out in 2010, 15, 16 years ago. They say that Katie Rossman wrote a hit piece in September 2025. They say that Katie groomed Joleene Altum, basically filling her head with abuse details and events, convincing her to claim that all these details are in fact her memories. Now, my source says that Team Amy just doesn't like Katie Rossman because she attempted to interview the family friend named in the proposal to the book, not in the book, but who first allegedly abused Amy when she was 8 years old. Now that set off a community firestorm, and news travels fast in a small town like Amarillo. New York Times stands by their reporting. But the issues facing Amy right now, here they are. Part 2 of the tell begins with Amy's first MDMA-assisted therapy session. She says 5 minutes in, she popped up and she said, "Why is he here?" Then Amy takes a sharp turn right then into the graphically detailed memories of the assault by her middle school teacher. Here's an excerpt that's palatable.
The first thing I remembered was my head hitting the wall. Mr. Mason's hand was on the back of my head, pushing me up against the yellow tile in the bathroom of the middle school. Then I heard a clang as his belt buckle hit the floor. The belt was brown leather with a gold buckle. I looked down at it and realized I am in trouble.
So is this the ghostwriter, Sam Lansky, taking liberties? I mean, he uses phrases like his cappuccino-colored cowboy boots. The central details of these horrific incidents are also claimed by Joleene Altum and corroborated by her daughter and a former co-worker at a sexual abuse camp or facility for kids called Father's Heart Ranch. And that woman is LaRonda Barnett. She gave a declaration totally corroborating Amy's story, that she heard it many, many years ago, 13, 15 years ago. This is the hard thing for people to comprehend. Amy's alleged abuse was very violent. Dragged across the floor, head banged up against the wall, tied up with a bandana, her mouth washed out with soap after the teacher defiled her mouth, for 4 years, from the ages of 12 to 16. That nobody saw anything ever, would be hard to believe about anyone, let alone a wealthy, 6 foot tall, now strong Division I athlete in Amy. How did nobody see anything or hear anything or see a bruised arm or something, not in her house, not in the school, not a friend? Important here, Amy writes about this abuse in this first MDMA experience in the third person. She writes about it as an observer. She's like, I was sitting in a corner of the room and I was witnessing this as if it were happening to someone else. That's important, that her first experience with MDMA was in the third person, right? She was observing like it was someone else. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. The second time she had an MDMA experience, it was in the first person. It was happening to her in that moment. Which takes us back to, what is Amy's motive here? So here are the theories. One, she made it up. She's, and if that happened, she is the worst kind of malignant narcissist and sociopath. But two, she is genuinely confused. Like, she felt these things. She conflated experiences. She identified as a survivor. I don't know what you want to call it, but she was feeling something that was in her. Okay. And the third option is that it happened. She says that it happened emphatically in the pages, but in her contract with Penguin Publishing, there's the line, these may be the memories of others. Look, either way, to the court of public opinion, she either made it up or she is a victim. There is no nuance. People don't understand the possibilities and capabilities of MDMA-assisted therapy. I'm not so sure that Amy does either. And also, people do not tend to empathize or hold space for billionaires who say they felt small or they, felt unseen. They want you to look, just be like Lauren Sanchez, okay, and just enjoy it. But leave the victiming to more relatable characters. But like I said before, can you imagine the reception a $70,000 a year, woman would get coming forward with this? I don't know that she'd get one at all. Mostly, though, the whole thing is triggering, right? So many people have suffered abuse as children, and I'll say me included, when I was 8 years old. And I also have a loved one who was hurt very badly in the age window of Amy. As for Amy's childhood abuse, or anyone's, like Amy's father here, if your child tells you that they were assaulted, you don't need to put them through an interrogation or an investigation. You need to show up for them, support them, no fact checking or anything, which is what Amy's family, her husband, her kids did for her. But when lives start to get ruined and lives have been destroyed and books have been sold on the back of that, questions are certainly permitted. Scrutiny is okay. The book was a smash. It made tons of money. People gave their money and their deep sympathy to Amy. Reese, Gwyneth, Oprah, Mariska, all rallied around Amy, promoted the book. She got the treatment from Drew Barrymore. Their silence to me and right now is interesting. Like I alluded to, this story is dead center in my wheelhouse because it brings together a lot of chapters in my life, things I can relate to. Abuse, psychedelic-assisted therapy, which if you are a follower, subscriber of Hot Mics, I've done. Specifically, I've done MDMA-assisted therapy, and also public shaming. I'm familiar with that. Let me be clear here also that I have no interest in an Amy Griffin takedown. Comeuppance is not on my agenda. To me, it is about truth because lives have been upended without query. And I believe in psychedelic-assisted therapy, and I'm also a bit concerned that this, life transforming treatment protocol is going to suffer because of all this fallout. Let's get into the head scratchers here. Okay, some of the things that just don't add up. What MDMA-assisted therapy does. Okay, Amy says to her MDMA facilitator in the book before their, her first life-changing experience, is everything we see real? First of all, I can speak from experience and say we don't see anything. Okay, it's not a hallucinogenic at all. You feel and things, you have access to deep feelings and all the clutter kind of falls away. It silences the ego. The facilitator says the medicine never lies. Well, the facilitator I know and the people I know and have worked with, it doesn't give you straight, truths in your life. I wouldn't trust that phrase. In Jane Doe versus Amy Griffin, the lawsuit that was filed on March 4th that started all of this, page 41 and 42, Joleene Altum and her attorneys point to Rick Doblin, who is a legend, the country's leading advocate for the therapeutic use of MDMA. He's the founder of the leading educational and research nonprofit called MAPS. He said that he connected Amy to her therapists, and in an interview last summer for the New York Times, the big article that came out with Katie Rossman as the writer, he said he read several drafts of the book and called it important, but he played down the reliability of memories retrieved with MDMA, saying they're often symbolic. Whether it's real or not, meaning whether the incident actually happened, from a therapeutic perspective, it doesn't matter. Now, this is the world's leading authority here. A lot of times people will develop stories that help them make sense of their life. Okay, keep in mind, Mr. Doblin, that names have been named and people have been outed and lives upended. He adds, in the therapeutic setting, what Amy went through, whether it's true or not, it has value because the emotion is real. Yes, he is correct. Mr. Doblin said both that frightening memories that people have pushed out of their mind come back under MDMA, and you have to be somewhat dubious, I guess, about recovered memories. Aha. The day before the article was published, Mr. Doblin called the New York Times quickly and said, I'd like to make an addendum to that. And he insisted that he did believe Amy's memories were real. Seems to me maybe a lawyer got to him, or somebody got to him and said, this could be problematic. Can you adjust? Also in Amy's defamation suit against Joleene, the countersuit, if you will, another expert insisted last minute that Amy did recover her memories before the medicine kicked in, which is an interesting change or edit. And then you got the guy, Dominique Price. Dominique, they call him Dominique Price. Okay. So odd. This is former reality show contestant on season 2 of Temptation Island. This guy was accused by Joleene of contacting her to glean details of her life story, posing as a talent manager or agent, someone working on something, a project, and maybe we could option your story. He signed an affidavit for Amy's defamation suit filed on June 15th, declaring he knew nothing. He didn't know Amy. He didn't know anything. I don't know why I'm in this, he says. Joleene has this exhibit that is beyond fascinating. She produces a notepad. She was in a social club meeting. She was taking notes as the secretary of the meeting and got a phone call from this Dominic. And she's like, I got to call you back. But she writes, as you can see here on the notepad, Dom, talent manager, here's his number. He wants to talk about a project. That's all traceable because the notes are on the meeting, and you'll be able, in a legal setting, to find out who was in the meeting and put a timestamp on it. But in Dominic Price's affidavit, which was filed in Amy's suit, so on behalf of Amy, he said, I never represented myself as a talent agent or producer in connection with a company called Sleeved, or using this phone number, and he puts the phone number in. I've never solicited personal, private, or traumatic stories from any individual for commercial, creative, entertainment, or investigative purposes. I've never contacted anyone from this number or from any other phone number to solicit personal, private, or traumatic stories, including stories of sex abuse. I've never asked any individual to keep any communications confidential for that purpose of gathering private personal information. He signed the affidavit on April 10th. And then he confirmed to a TikToker named Katie and KC, they were messaging back and forth, that on April 15th, 5 days later, a PI paid him a visit. Keep in mind, the public didn't know about this until it was part of, a filing on June 15th. But 5 days later, like Katie, the TikToker, said on July 6th, why?
Piers, you might have known some shit at the time, but hey, I get it. Just a random lady in your DMs. Why would you tell me anything?
Katie's theory here, if not Dom, okay, maybe it was someone posing as Dom. And then Katie uncovered a chain that she posted, which shows that Dom worked with a guy named David McLean. And David McLean went on to work at a company called Thumbtack. And Thumbtack had an investment from Tiger Global, which John Griffin is involved in. I don't know if that means anything, but it's enough to say Dominic Price is not totally irrelevant and a random mistake in all of this. There's more to that. Katie also pokes holes in Amy's position that she was never in Palm Springs or that area in 2019 when Joleene claims that they met for coffee. She says she never met with Joleene, and Joleene says you did in 2019. Again, Amy says I was never in there, never in LA or Palm Springs in 2019 or 18 or 20 or any of that. Well, hats off to Katie and KC on TikTok. She tracked down the tail number of the Bombardier Global 6000 private plane owned by John Griffin that landed in New Zealand when COVID hit. That's where they got the tail number. And then she looked into that plane's flight patterns, which show Napa Valley, the Mojave area, which is very close to Palm Springs, Los Angeles as well, for a podcast with someone named Arlen Hamilton, and a Bumble conference because, Amy seeded the company, the dating app Bumble, as part of her investment portfolio. So there's more there. Now, back to the book and the first person that Amy accuses of assault and grape. That is James. What about James? James is the son of her father's hunting buddy. At least in the book he is. I have identified James. I was visiting with some people over the weekend, and a woman had led me to who that is, because this person's life has been upended. He's had to quit different groups and clubs and things, and kind of been shunned by his community. I reached out to James. I have not heard back from him. It is definitely him, because I called him as well, and his name was on the voicemail. So Amy claims that he raped her during a summer abroad in college when she was overseas. She says that her father's friend's son, after Amy told her dad, sure, I'd like to meet him, calls her up, takes her to a Premier League soccer game. They go afterwards for dinner. They share a bottle of wine. Afterwards, they go back to James's flat. They drink more wine. And as they're getting towards the bedroom, he says, where's your favorite place to have sex? And Amy writes this in her book. And she says, I was nervous. I didn't know what to say. And I said, the hot tub. And they proceed to hop in bed. And he thought that meant, as a go sign, according to Amy. And so they begin. And she says that she had said, no, no, no. And it happened anyway. So, look, if that happened, then he deserves it, whatever happens to him. But the next day after the event, she was hoping that he would call, and he did. And he said, look, I wasn't wearing any protection last night. She says this. She claims in her book that he said, I wasn't wearing any protection, so, you got to go take care of it, meaning the pregnancy, if there is one. Which is callous if it happened. But she goes on to say they had sex many more times that summer and continued on to date a little bit. And amazingly, that traumatic experience with James did not trigger the memories that MDMA later would. Also very interesting, halfway through the book, Amy comes back and writes more about James. She said, James, with whom I stayed friends. We vacationed with our families. I was friends with his wife and kids. Wait, what? Yeah, it turns out they remained family friends for 25 plus years, did lots of things together as families, played with him in a member guest tennis tournament out in Long Island. I mean, she acknowledges that to continue a relationship, as she was uncovering these memories about her childhood, to continue a relationship with James would be complicit, right? It would make her the ultimate people pleaser. Why would I do that? I have to stand up for myself. So she instantly cut him off after an email from him popped up asking for vacation advice. Hey, taking the wife and kids on, vacation to wherever it is. Give me some advice, Amy. You know everything. She cut him off and never responded. And that was it. This leads Amy into a section of the book about the patriarchy, a recoiling of men, all the way throughout my life. Men have objectified, me sexually or commented about my body. It goes on. Then we get to the main culprit here, Mr. Mason, described in the book Proposal as a religiously affiliated gun lover and outdoorsman. Some other personal family details made him easily identifiable in the community. But he is the central villain of the story. He is the worst type of monster, if you believe this. A middle school teacher who violently grapes a 12-year-old girl all over school grounds, threatens her, scars her for life. One violent 4-year graping event after event of one student by an otherwise seemingly clean teacher. She alleges in the book that he said to her, you come from one of the nicest families in town. Nobody will believe you. And she did. Her father owned 50 convenience stores at the time of a convenience store called Toot and Totem. So she was very wealthy, certainly by Amarillo standards. But imagine if this guy still lived in your town, right? Well, he does. For 30 years, he's lived there without incident. No corroborating stories, no other stories that talk about this guy. I mean, In the book, Amy then writes, if I wanted to be credible, I would need more than memories. I would need evidence, as she was planning legal action, what she could do to take action against this guy. And, well, evidence, they looked hard for evidence. John, her husband, enlisted Kroll and Associates, which is one of the leading investigative corporate security firms in the world. It's a serious company. My father actually was on the board of Kroll and Associates. I knew the founder well. I know his son, but the founder is Jules Kroll, and he built one of the most serious businesses in this front. Kate, the investigator, is written about in the book, assuming that she works for Kroll, couldn't find much. And with all the resources of Kroll, I mean, you know, they can find anything in South America and certainly in, you know, Amarillo, Texas. They looked hard. All Amy and her team can point to regarding Mr. Mason is that he may have attended the university, the university he claimed to have attended, he may not have. Upon reaching out to a source on that, I find out that the name of the university changed while he was there. And also, Amy talks about a girl from her class named Allie. Amy alleges that she and Allie spoke during discovery, and Allie recalled that Mr. Mason was a creep and, quote, specifically creepy about you, Amy. Quote, I remember him standing really close to you, talking in the hallway. He was always staring at you, said Allie to Amy, allegedly. Also, while he was driving Allie and some girls to a camp retreat, Allie said, I remember him staring at Emily's crotch. That's as far as we go with Mr. Mason. But what's hard to understand is Amy's father, seemingly very good man, well-respected in the community, never paid Mr. Mason a visit. She writes that her dad said, I'll go see that man right now. And she said, no. What do you mean, no? Let your dad go visit this piece of garbage or someone else. And then there's Coach Bess Taylor. That's not her real name. It's a pseudonym in the book. We know who she is as well, but she was friendly with Mr. Mason back then. They were co-teachers and friends back in the middle school years. And this woman, Bess Taylor, was Amy's volleyball coach. Amy got her on the phone, and in a catch-up call, Coach Taylor brings up some recent community disturbances. She's like, oh my God, yeah, there's all this junk with Mr. Mason, she reported to Amy. People calling around, making allegations, but nothing's come of it, so it seems they backed off. And Amy says she didn't know what to say, but she came up with, well, he must have been sad about that. And Coach Taylor said, he was heartbroken. Then she waits and she says, Amy, wait, did you have a problem with him? I need to know. And then Amy says, I let the silence speak volumes. My heart is breaking for you, Amy. I won't even talk to him again. I'm never going to talk to him. Wow, the perfect payback for graping your, favorite student for 4 years, the silent treatment. Amy told her coach every detail of what had happened to her with Mr. Mason after that. By the way, the coach, told Amy while they were at it that she was assaulted as a girl. And while we're at it, in the book, there was an attempt on Amy's mother when she was young by a milkman, and also an intruder who turned out to be a serial rapist. Later, they found out into Amy's college apartment with her, or rented house in college with her roommates. And Amy was upstairs and the roommate was in the kitchen. Nothing happened, but there was an intruder. In the book, when Amy is plotting legal action against Mr. Mason, which was never taken due to statute of limitations, she ended up hiring her father's friend, who was a local Amarillo lawyer named Duke. Duke, in the book, again, a pseudonym for a real man whom we've also identified. Duke advises Amy to speak to the police sergeant, Gordon Eatley, but he says, look, when you do, leave out MDMA and don't mention that the last time you were raped was in high school at 16. The sergeant won't understand the MDMA part, and the judge wouldn't take kindly to the second part. But Amy ends up speaking to Sergeant Gordon Eatley. For his part, he says the inability, this is comforting to Amy. He says her inability to remember every detail after 30 years and to have repressed all these memories make her more believable. He said to Amy, "This is one of the more credible calls I've had in years," which, again, another inoculating point here by the author. Later, Amy circles back and tells the sergeant that the last time she was raped was at 16. He says, "Why did you leave that out?" She says, "My lawyer told me to." And again, he comforts her and with allegedly, he said that's totally normal for a 16-year-old to submit again, which I have heard. I think we all know that if it's happened once, it can happen several times. But again, this is, it's inoculating to people's disbelief that there would be no memory of multiple violent, assaults between the ages of 12 and 16 years old. And then we get to Claudia, okay? Who is Claudia? And that's where all of this ends. This whole legal rigmarole ends with Claudia. Claudia is a big takeaway from Amy's MDMA journey with the facilitator. After it was over and she was, putting her hair in a bun and kind of chilling on the couch, and after she had recovered the horrific memories, she was left thinking about this girl that was on her mind, Claudia, and she immediately wrote about her in her journal. She was haunted by the idea that something had also happened to Claudia. She writes, in the memory, Mr. Mason was standing in the hallway by the cafeteria talking to Claudia. His hand was on her shoulder. I walked past, slinking behind them into the bathroom. I'd never understood the significance of this memory, why it had stayed with me all these years. Finally, it made sense. In that moment, I thought it must be happening to her too. The sight of them together made it real to me in a way that my own abuse was not. Through Claudia, I experienced the horror of what was being done to me. And in the memory, after I slid past them and through the swinging door, and I stood in the empty bathroom with my hand on my heart and took several quick breaths. My chest was tight. I was panicked. My inhalations were shallow. I was so relieved he didn't follow me inside. But why had I not written about myself after the journey? Like, why was it about Claudia? And finally, it made sense. It must be happening to her too, right? The sight of them together made it real to me in a way that my own abuse was not. Through the prism of Claudia, I'd experienced the horror of what was being done to me. That's a really telling line right there. Could be. What if nothing had happened to Claudia? Was I projecting what was happening to me onto her? Or perhaps vice versa? I'm adding that. Amy says she has no recollection of a woman named Joleene who claims, and like I said before, has corroboration, multiple corroborations, that she is the real Claudia. Amy and her ghostwriter, Sam Lansky, say they met with the real Claudia in Tennessee. Sam corroborates this in his declaration, though it amounted to nothing. They met, and Claudia had nothing to give Amy. She heard her story and gave only her sympathy. There was no Me Too. Nonetheless, Claudia co-stars in the ending to The Tell. Back in New York City, after, her visit with Claudia and Sam Lansky, her writer, after that coffee meeting, she goes back to New York and she's in her apartment and she's glum, right? She's sad. She didn't get the closure that she was after. And after a period of time, a postcard arrives containing 2 handwritten messages. On the card, it said on the front, I don't understand why I was given an award for being kind to someone. I mean, isn't that what you're supposed to do? A quote from Amy Griffin, circa 7th grade. Amy was like, oh my God, wow. That's kind of what I said with Claudia, because Claudia was a girl, who was from lived in a foster home at the time. Amy had lent her a dress to go to the middle school dance. and as we said in our last episode, it's at this dance that Claudia, Joleene, was, as she alleges, she was assaulted by a teacher, not the teacher Amy says, her own teacher who left town, a year later. But, she has corroboration on this. The boy that took her to the dance, who we believe is a therapist today, but he corroborates in a declaration that he saw, a Joleene emerge from the back with this teacher, and she was disheveled. Her hair was a mess. She was tousled. And he says that she later admitted that something had happened in a sexual nature. Back to the postcard. Amy turns that postcard over, and on the back is a message in upside down handwriting that says, "I didn't have it in me to tell you the truth." Wow. It was postmarked New York City. She thought, oh my God, could this be Claudia? Hey, John, what the hell? If a postcard is postmarked in New York, does that mean, it's where or is it where it's processed or where it's received? And, I think we all know it's where it's processed. If it's not in that town, it's regional. So it wouldn't be from Claudia, or probably wasn't, but she reached out to Claudia and asked, hey, thank you for sending that. Oh my God. I could fly down there and be with you. I just want to hold you. Oh my God, this. And she says, it's not me. I didn't send that postcard. But Amy says in the end, it still serves as, it's not corroboration, but it's validation for her feelings and experiences. Here's the kicker. Joleene says that she did send Amy a postcard. And if she sent one and Amy received one, then there you go. Let's see it. Let's have a handwriting sample that's going to be produced. Now, again, there's a hearing on July 23rd. 3 days from now, the judge will have to decide if there is enough merit to Joleene's case against Amy Griffin. Will it go forward? I would be extremely shocked if the judge says there's not enough here for Joleene Altum. I would be stunned. And I would expect there to be a bit of an uproar because, as we all know, the TikTokers, the YouTubers, the podcasters who are paying attention to this, and I think we're right at the forefront of that, something that would be that wouldn't pass the smell test. But we will find out. Thursday is when that happens. But look, until our next episode, let me say this. I have empathy for Amy Griffin. I have empathy for Amy Griffin, even if she got things confused. I know that there's pitchforks and torches, in the village, and like, no way, you billionaire, liar. Here you are appropriating someone else's experience, and you're selling books, and, and by the way, I know people who live out in the Hamptons near Amy, and she's got fancy friends and a huge piece of property in a very Tony area of East Hampton. And Roger Federer comes and stays for 2 weeks, and the fancy, celebrity female founders are in and out of her house. She's definitely living this huge life. And I know there's a voice of people who will be like, no way, girl, you tried to become a victim and be like, put yourself up on this pedestal and blah, 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 blah. I just know that, there are some people around her that let her, if the memories are not hers, and again, there's very little corroboration for her, if they're not hers and she got them confused or mixed up with somebody else, conflated in some way, it went too far. Lives got, I don't care to see anyone torched or destroyed or, ruined, public shamed until they can't get up. I hope that she would address this, that she would make restitution. Certainly got enough money to do that if that ends up being the case. And then let her make sense of it. And I also really care that psychedelic assisted therapy doesn't suffer from this, okay? It's legal in Australia. It needs to be legal here, and it needs to be handled by people who know what they're doing. It can be very helpful. And, I hope it doesn't result in lawsuits that shouldn't be there. But it's a positive thing. So we ask these questions and we look into this and we cover this, and we do it because lives have been hurt and the truth needs to come out for that very reason. All right. Next episode will be in a couple of days, probably Wednesday. And there's always something happening here. Thank you for being with us. Please hit like, subscribe, join the Hot Mics family here. Follow us on all the social medias, and we'll be constantly updating.